Yeah, all right, simmer down. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Edward Stern. I'm lead writer at a company called Splash Damage. We mainly make multiplayer first-person shooters. I am a writer. Not all of these things go together. It's very odd writing some backstory, some cinematics, but mainly multiplayer barks, combat barks, grenade, medic, and so on, with a different number of exclamation marks after each one. As a writer, it's particularly odd because you've given up all control over timing. There's no beautifully judged A-B dialogue in a scene. The players can trigger these things anytime they want, and each individual line has got to work out of context, and it's really context that I want to talk about here. I've called this talk Writing Wrongs, and there are two kinds of fuck-up I want to talk about. One is, and this is very much from the kind of AAA, if you want to call it that, or high production values end of things. As I think we all know, high production values, whatever that means, does not necessarily mean a good end product or necessarily a coherent end product. And some of the lowest budget, lowest production value games we've seen in the last couple of years have had the most exquisite tonal control and the most specific artistic content. And I'm thinking about Vine games like Horsemaster. Who here's played Horsemaster? All of you who haven't, go out now and play the thing. It's a free text game, it's just text. It's extraordinary. It's one of the best things I've ever read. I really urge you to check it out. Why can't AAA games do that? Why can't more photorealistic games have that kind of control over things? Surely it's more like Hollywood. Well, partly I want to talk about the general problems of the production pipeline and why things go weird, and then more specifically how I screwed up in my own work trying to do good and kind of got away from it. So, writing is quite an odd trade, and writing games is quite an odd trade because we train for a completely different job. We train as screenwriters. If you want to get better at writing prose, well, you study your Mark Twain or your George Orwell and you learn how to write simple declarative subject, verb, object sentences. And then you try and learn how to write scenes and characters and motivations, and then you do screenwriting courses like Robert McKee's story course, which is tremendous, and you really should do that if you get the chance. I was very cynical going in, and it was extraordinary. And it's full of things that sound incredibly obvious once they've been pointed out, like, if the power relationship between your characters at the end of the scene is the same as at the beginning of the scene, then nothing has happened, and it's just talk. And the number of times I'm watching a film and something has gone wrong is just like, I don't know what the character wants, or why they need it now, or who's trying to stop them, or why it's important that they get it. These are the rules of thumb that if you break them, you better have a really good reason, because otherwise it's just going to go wrong and weird. That's about talent and crafts. What I want to talk about is what's specific to games and makes things go wrong, even when the writing's not necessarily terrible. I would say there is an inverse relationship between the effectiveness of techniques for film and TV and theatre and basically all other forms of dramatic writing and CG realistic games. Every medium gives you something for free. Every stylistic choice is good for some things and terrible at other things. What do you get with even the cheapest theatre production is the human face reacting. Think how many of those great... Sorry, this microphone's really annoying. Can you hear me like this anyway? Shall I stand to one side from the microphone and escape the goldfish bowl? Would that be all right? Rock and roll, fantastic. There we go. Oh, it's you, hello. Think about all those great moments of revelation in films, not necessarily with dialogue. Think of Roy Scheider's face in Jaws when there's the reverse dolly zoom into his face. That's what film stuff and theatre stuff is all about, moments of emotional revelation. Why are games terrible at this? Well, because we're wedded, at least at my end of the industry, we're wedded to photorealism, which is really good at some things, and it's bloody terrible at others. And I want to try and establish what the costs are for both. And then you've got text games, which are like radio. You're writing for radio. And the great thing about radio is the pictures are better, as we all know. So, people have been at this a while. In Hollywood, screenwriters were originally playwrights or novelists, and they were dragged over, and with varying success, they worked out how to write for film. One of my favourite bits of screenwriting I can't do it word for word, but it's something like, dawn breaks over the island. 1,000 rivulets of colour break down. Colourful parakeets run up. It's this beautiful scene-setting thing. The script was for King Kong, a black and white film. Like, the writer just hadn't got, that's not what the medium is about. There's a wonderful Marshall McLuhan phrase, the horseless carriage phase, which is the phase that every medium goes through when it's new and it's just been compared with what went before. So, oh, an automobile, it's like a horseless carriage. No, that's not what's important about the car, but you're describing it in terms of what went before. Sometimes that's really useful. There are lots of screenwriting and movie writing and theatrical writing techniques that I use, but in the medium I work in, they don't always work well, and I'm starting to work out why that is. So, the thing you get for free is the human face reacting. The Quarter to Three movie podcast, which is incredibly cruel and fair, was talking about the movie A Most Violent Year. And they said, which I loved, he said, but basically what happens is that he just goes into meetings and he's again and again just given bad news. And when you think about it, movies are just a string of scenes where people either receive or give bad news. And then every year we get all the people who pretended to receive or give bad news in a big event, and we give one of them good news and the rest of them bad news, and we decide which is best at pretending. That moment of the human face reacting, we're really good at reading human faces. We've got fantastic eyes for it. We'll see human faces in rocks, on Mars. We want to see that stuff. So does it follow that having a particularly high poly face will give you a good result? No, clearly not. Wooden oddness. It just makes the things that don't work stand out even more, which is one of the reasons why I think stylized approaches have got so much going for them. I think the Telltale games have come up with an extraordinarily good middle ground. You know, is everyone familiar with the term uncanny valley? Just to reiterate, Japan has a very long history of human-looking robots. They had clockwork, bamboo, tea-serving robots in the 19th century. They are very concerned with robots that will not freak you out because they have an aging population and not many young people, and they need robots that are not going to scare the shit out of old people with dementia. Who leads the world in military robotics? America. Who leads the world in geriatric care robots? Japan. So a lot of thought has gone into how you could come up with a machine that will not scare people, or will feel you can relate to in a human way. And this researcher, whose name I always forget, in the 70s came up with the idea of, oh, well, the more human it looks, the more warmly you'll relate to it, and the more immersed you'll be, the more you'll relate to it as a human character. Right up until the point where it's nearly human, and then suddenly you get this drop. He called it the uncanny valley. I can't remember the Japanese phrase either. Great research, Ed. Good guy. And the notion is, how can we get out of this? And do we even want to get out of it? Because there's something about a nearly but not quite human face that is incredibly unsettling. Who here has seen a movie called The North Pole Express? Amazing. It's Tom Hanks, the warmest, most human actor in Hollywood, looking fucking terrifying with this dead-eyed serious. He plays lots of different characters, and you show it to kids, and they're just like, "Ah! What's happened to him?" And games keep on hitting that, and I'm fed up of this thing of, oh, well, how is it? It's good for games. Why can't we just be good? Why can't we just good for cinema? Just good for books? What's stopping us doing that? Well, there's a lot in the way, and I'm not asking for special treatment here. I just want to explain from kind of inside the sausage factory how it seems to us. We in AAA are agog and in awe and jealous of small teams that can do really focused personal statements, because everything that we do passes through dozens of pairs of hands over a very long geographical distance. The animators may not be on the same continent as you are, and it takes so long to do it. Like, if stuff goes wrong quickly, you can tell. If stuff goes wrong slowly, it's in the game before you realize how weird it looks. Jerry Lewis, the American comedian, also quite a notable director and cinematographer. He invented video playback. And every single film in the world, whether they're on video or actual cinema, have this ability. You've got the main camera, and there's a prism, and at 90 degrees there is mounted a cheap video camera, so you do a take, you shout cut, and you can immediately see what it looks like. You won't get sound, the lighting won't be absolutely perfect, but you can see how big it is in the frame. Most bad performances are not bad, they're just the wrong size. It's inappropriate. And when you're watching it, it's so obvious. It's like, why are you doing that? Couldn't you tell what just happened? No, that was shot 6 months later. You've got no idea. The illusion is that it's all happening in the same space and time. But that's exactly the viewpoints that the player has that is denied the people making people making the game. So there's reasons of scale, of cost, of size. You could have corporate interference. You might have several different people writing the game. More commonly, a lot of stuff gets cut. And it is literally the case that people have said, oh yeah, you remember the fire level? Well, it's now an ice level. Does that affect any of the dialogue? Kinda. Mocap and CGI are really good at some things. And I don't want to say it's con, because it's clearly not. But there is a huge disconnect, and I cannot express vividly enough how difficult facial animation is if you're at the photorealistic end of things. It doesn't matter how high fidelity the recording of the actor is, whether it's performance capture, where you're recording the audio at the same time as that. Valve, by the way, don't do that. They record the voices differently, then they play it out for the mocap performers, and they mime to the voices. No one's going to tell me that Valve don't do great at that. It's a different approach. They make it work very well. I'll come back to what Valve are brilliant at. Basically, they only put stuff in the games they can do perfectly well, and they cut anything they don't like. And Portal is doubly significant for that, and for reasons I'll go into later. But it doesn't matter how great high fidelity capture you're getting if you're playing it on a model with orders of magnitude fewer points of articulation. All animation is a con. It's rods and hinges. That's not how the human body works. The shoulder is not a ball joint. There's a ball joint in there. It's a huge range of movements. Look how, you can always tell a wireframe, I'm going to go and walk over here. There's no weight to it. There's nothing going on. That happens facially. The face is an extraordinary series of muscles. If you just do this, like it worked for a while, it can be really effective if you want the character, the avatar, to look kind of blocky and weird. My advice to any developers here, find out what the clunkiest part of your game is and make it meaningful that it's that clunky. Seriously, okay, Portal, Valve. So they did Half-Life 2, and there was for my money, the most effective NPC in games, Alex Vance. Just brilliant, fantastic character, fun, gorgeous, pretty, funny, really good at her job, really competent. Someone you'd want to spend time with. It really convinced me as a character. Beautiful facial animation. Have they done any human protagonists since then? Well, kind of Left 4 Dead, but it's a much more exaggerated style. What do they do in Portal? It's a machine. The whole environment is a machine. They made a whole environment out of hinges and rods and ball joints. They created a character, What are they really good at? Writing and directing voice acting. Is there a better character in games than GLaDOS, even when she's a potato? But they made that significant. What other possible setting for a game is there? And also there's the problem about interactivity. Storytelling requires passivity. You've got to sit there. You can't just, make Ed talk about something else. I know you want to, but that's not going to happen. And this is a problem that, which affects all of literature. When novels started off in English, not so much in Spanish, where they started first, but in English, they were epistolary. They were written as letters or diary entries. Why? Because they're trying to solve the problem of simultaneous action and narration. Dear diary, you wouldn't believe what just happened. Les liaisons dangereuses. Oh, I'm going to write, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this really wicked thing. You wouldn't believe what happened. It kind of doesn't work. It took a while to realize that you could have a narrator that's omniscient. That maybe you've got an unreliable narrator. That took centuries of work to do. We're still kind of struggling with that because it's so crushingly literal. There are so few games where you can, because it's like, imagine, Super Mario Brothers. Well, actually, that isn't how it turned out. I jumped on the thing and he got killed. No, that's not really what happened. That would be a deal breaker, right? Anything that gets in the way of the player's interactivity, of making things happen. That's one of the other geniuses of Portal, one of its many geniuses. What other setting could there possibly be that consists solely of the player's actions? A test chamber. I mean, bizarrely, that's the big phrase from Half-Life, but I can't think of anything else. And they bagsed it first, and they did it first, and they've done it twice perfectly. The bastards. But even if you don't go really badly wrong, and we've seen examples where it does go wrong, where you've kind of got, here's a CGI cinematic to establish the context for your actions, but we're going to take control away from you. Like, we need you to not be doing stuff while this stuff plays out. And it can be done with quite a degree of felicity and skill, like in Half-Life, where there's no cutscenes, you just find out that you're not moving when something happens in front of you. Or Bioshock, you tend to be behind glass and someone will address you. several times in that game. You're in a booth of some kind, or there's a locked door, and you can only see that. But they don't take control away from you completely. They don't move the camera away from your point of view. You see the ones that don't work out so well, and it's fugly. So when does it go wrong and weird? I think it goes wrong and weird when it's a deal breaker. When you're trying to load all the thematic significance of the game into the cutscenes, and then it's contradicted by the actual actions. There's a phrase I use whenever I'm trying to help prose writers or novelists or playwrights convert into games writing, and it is, oh great, you've got a prose style, awesome. Well, all of your verbs are limited by the buttons on the controller, all of your adjectives are being done by the character and environment art team, and your adverbs are all being done by the animators. Good luck with your prose style. You've got to write stuff that just works through action and reaction, and it's hard. I mean, to some extent that matches with good David Mamet style screenwriting, where he says, you should be able to turn the sound off and know what's going on in the scene. It should be that obvious. He's very good at it. He's also kind of nuts. So what happens when you get a really beautiful performance and then you play it back on a model with way fewer models? It doesn't go well. It goes weird. It gets too big or too small. There's a game called Brink, which I worked on a couple of years ago. It has quite an exaggerated facial style. I'll come back to that. So the eyes of the models are actually quite realistic. The further away from the eyes you get, the more exaggerated it is, big nose, big chin and stuff. So the mocap performers, performance capture performers, because they were saying the lines at the same time, we had to ask them to do a really weird thing. We said, right, this is an opera, this is a film physical performance, right? It's a TV vocal performance, but it's an opera facial performance. Because the models, the facial rigs were so huge, the meshes, they kind of do a big take like, oh, and the mesh would hardly crease. We had to really go, no, eyebrows, loads of eyebrows, lots of turning the head to look at stuff, but keep the vocal performance still kind of studio theatre size. That's like doing that all the time. It's really hard. So fidelity. I don't really want. I mean, the amazing results are possible, but not on our budget. Naughty Dog do amazing work, but they do what we'd all like to. I love it when people say, well, why don't you do it like Naughty Dog? Like, that's a style you can write in. Like, oh, okay, I'll just get Sony to build me a mocap studio. and block book the actors for 2 months and just rehearse them. What they get to do is to rewrite. They get to try stuff out and see how it works in game. Jerry Lewis's video playback. As soon as you say cut, you can take a look at it and go, oh, actually that was a bit big. That doesn't quite work with that in the background. Can we just bring it in a bit? Or, no, it's a medium shot, so you're actually out to here. We don't know that when we do our CG. The sets may not exist yet. We have no idea. We know where the camera is. Oh no, wait, we don't. We put that in later. That's why things start going weird. Or, like if you had an extra in the background, like, there's the main actor, there's the B actor in the back, and then you've got an extra in the back doing this. You'd shout cut, and you'd stop it. You don't know that that's been put in there by an animator until the fucking thing's been rendered. Sorry, look at this, kids, oh no. Reindeered, I mean. So, there are tips and tricks. There are things you can get better at technically in terms of writing. The lines always get shorter. You can write a good, actable bit of dialogue. And by the way, all the most problematic scenes that I've ever shot, the ones that make my toes curl, on the day in the mocap studio, everyone, when the director said cut, everyone went, that was the one, wasn't it? That was the best take. And it doesn't end up that way. Because it gets made by lots of different pairs of hands. One of the reasons that Avatar, whatever you think of it, is a very effective bit of storytelling is that James Cameron had oversight over every frame of that film, which is why it took 3 years to finish principal photography. To put it mildly, I am not in his position. So I think there are lots of generic things that work, that go with. I mean, there are some things you get for free. For example, let's think in movie terms. Like we're making a movie. What's the cheapest thing you can get? Close-up of an actor's face, a one shot. A bit more expensive, 2 actors, 2 shots. Medium shot. Hang on, you can't do it on a soundstage, you've got to go on location? Well, that's a bit more expensive, but you can do that. Crowd scenes, that's starting to get more expensive. Building sets, whoa, hang on. You want stuff to fly around? You want stuff to blow up? That's going to cost you. Games, it's absolutely the other way around. It's an inverse relationship. What's the easiest thing for us to do? Like, everything is a set for us. There are no locations. Everything's a model. Everything's a prop. The mountains are props. The characters are props we have to build and then light and do figures on. But once you've made a building, it's not that much more expensive to make it fly around than just sit. This apparently is not the case in movies. It's an exaggeration to say we've only got to make the first gunshot or the first explosion and then copy and paste them. There's a lot more to it than that. But, you know, if that big special effects gun battle, we don't lose a day shooting. All our shots are helicopter shots if we want them to be. But crowd scenes, okay, that's still pretty expensive. That's pretty tough. But once you've got one canned animation, you can just play it all the time. Hopefully not in sync. That's always the worst thing. Is like you get 5 guards at once, all of which go. 2 shots are a bit more expensive. The worst thing in the world is the close-up. A facially realistic close-up. If that's the style you're going for. And honestly, I think we've wrung that stone pretty dry. There's some wonderful results, but basically you're into the realms of just CG animation. There's an old movie phrase. Regular movies, you've got 3 chances to save them. Arguably 4. You can fix them at the script stage, you can fix them on set, and you can fix them in edit. Games are like animation. You've got 1 chance when you storyboard it. And that's it. And we usually storyboard it after we've made it, which is unideal. I should say also how weird it is if you're working on a game with a big publisher and they sign a deal with their book publisher to make a strategy guide of the game. Because what they finish up doing is basically the game design document you wish you'd had 3 years ago. Oh, this is how it all balances out. This is what ended up in the game. It's like being given. It's like this is your life, and here is everything you should have done. So that's the general stuff. More specifically, I want to talk about how I wrote stuff and it went weird for what I'd like to think are good reasons, but I'm not sure. So Brink, I don't think it's a particularly brilliant game, but it's the one I wrote and got made, and it had scenes in it, so I know more about how it got made than anything else, and I don't really want to talk about other people's work too much. It's set in the future. We are going to have 2 faction leaders, and they both needed to be flawed. I really badly did not want them to be more Caucasian, short-haired men. We have done that. We're up to speed. We know how that goes. They're always going to have short hair because hair is so difficult to animate. There is a reason we'll be stuck with Space Marines for a while. Because seriously, one of the reasons we failed with Brink is that we were trying to innovate on all fronts and all the time, and we just couldn't sum it up in a single phrase or a single image. When that came out, Left 4 Dead 2 came out. Left 4 Dead, even the title tells you how to play the game. The logo tells you what sort of game it is. All the great brands tell you how to enjoy them. Coke, the pause that satisfies. Does anyone think that Coke could be a mobile phone brand? No, it's all about. It's quite a weird logo, but the presentation of it is all about a pause, a social event. It's all about drinking it. Brink did not tell people how to play it. It was unfamiliar. And there's a great, if you haven't read Scott Rogers' book, Level Up, the Guide to Video Game Design, please do so. It's fucking brilliant. It's really good. And he's got a notion of the triangle of weirdness. You can have, there's the setting, there's the abilities. Oh, what is it? There's the setting, the characters, and the abilities, and only one of them can be weird. Bless you. Like that. If everything's weird, if it's an unfamiliar setting and unfamiliar characters and they've got unfamiliar powers, where are you going to root? How do you know what to do? I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, but it's a really good place to start off with. Do get that book. He also did one called Swipe This about mobile games. I learn stuff every time I go back to it. Like there'll just be a list of, here's the sum total of different opponents that you will meet in a 2D platformer. And there's just 10 of them. You go, oh come on, there's got to be more than, wow. And it's full of things that are incredibly obvious once they've been pointed out and written down, which is my mark of a good idea. As soon as you hear it, you go, well, yeah, of course, somebody had to come up with that. Like they say in Mad Men, 99 cents, $1.99. Somebody thought of that. Not $2, not $1, 99 cents. That was clever. So there I was thinking, okay, I want a diverse game. Why? Seriously, that's not a dumb question. And as I'm sure no one here doesn't know, there are some people who are not wild about games getting more diverse in terms of subject matter or content or stuff, because it feels like stuff's being taken away from them. It's like, Call of Duty will come out, don't worry. It's like, it's like, no, sorry, everything will now be Dear Esther. That's it. We're just, as a medium, we are done. Which is weird, because no one worries that there are foreign language, feature-length documentaries if they're into, like, Michael Bay movies. Like, no one's going to take away Transformers. No, you must all watch Iranian independent cinema right now. But there is an enormous mismatch between ways people think about games and movies, and it's fascinating mapping those contours. For instance, the degree of unrealism I've experienced from game design students who say, yeah, I'm going to do this course and I'm going to get a lead design position. I was like, where? Why would anyone let you do that? I said, no, it's an accredited course. It's like, I'll be looking at your CV. Already I don't care. Nobody thinks, oh, I really enjoyed The Avengers. That was a great film. I really enjoyed watching that film. They'll probably let me direct the second one. Which is what that sounds like to me. It's like, no, make your own stuff. Be lead designer on your project, by all means. But unless your degree is in computer science, applied maths, or seriously heavyweight animation, it's going to be your portfolio. It's going to be the stuff you've worked on and finished, not the piece of paper. We just don't care. It doesn't matter. But why diversity? Historically, the people who got to make games were vanishingly small demographic. It was a handful of overwhelmingly white, I presume straight, I don't really know, Western males with some Japanese guys. That was it. That was what games started off as. That was true of cinema when it started off, but now cinema is owned by the world, and we realise it's an art form and it can do anything. I'm perfectly happy for games to be a medium, particularly because they're neither rare nor well done. Ho-ho. But honestly, I don't think of it as art. I think of it as entertainment. I don't think you should set out to make art. I think you should set out to entertain. That doesn't mean it can't be serious. It doesn't mean it can't be personal. I just think it's better off to aim for good than great. Let other people decide if it's great art. Just make stuff the best you know how to. And I want to talk about how I tried to do that, and I think I fucked up. It really matters to me. It matters to me a great deal. I was lucky enough to grow up surrounded by stories full of people who looked and sounded like me. I am white, Western, educated. If I push my voice up, I sound like I know what I'm talking about. People will give me credibility, whether I know what I'm talking about or not. Not everyone is in that situation. Not everyone is surrounded by images of people who look and sound like them. That's wrong. That's bad. I cannot wait for the games to be owned as a medium by the world. There will be some games I fiercely disagree with. I kind of can't wait for some really proper, like a full-on racist to make a game. It's like, yeah, you get to do this too. That means you don't get to take it away from anyone else. There will be games made by regimes I don't like. There will be North Korean computer games eventually, which I doubt I will agree with the political message of. I mean, more than Medal of Honor? I don't know how that works. Sorry, I'll wrap this up. I wanted it to be diverse. I really wanted to have these characters. So we had these two faction leaders, and I didn't want to fall into that trap of, but they're both going to be noble if misguided. I wanted them to be flawed. Nick Hornby, who for my money writes some of the best female characters in modern fiction, he said it took him years to be brave enough to write women who weren't perfect. He just couldn't do it. They were always smarter and better organised than the male characters. And I just thought, well, am I going to have a character, am I going to make him faultless just because he's black? Or because he's Chinese? So we ended up with these two characters, Mokwena, who's head of security, and Chen, who's head of the resistance, kind of labour leader. And I wanted to make it clear that it was the system that just broke them. They both thought they were doing the right thing, and it was just this sad, inevitable thing that things fell apart. We cast two excellent actors. Nonso Anozie, who's been in Game of Thrones and much else, who's brilliant, even though he does blot out the sun, he's so enormous and barely fits in the VO booth. And Junix Anoshin, who's he's not actually Chinese, he's Filipino, but he's a very experienced stage actor. Here's the problem. Right there is the problem. Sorry, I don't know how that was. It was a facially exaggerated game. Now with the Anglo characters, with the Caucasian characters, and also just naming avatar types in games, that's a fucking minefield. It's a minefield. What do you call them? Caucasian? Asian? Negroid? That's not a word I want in any game I'm working on. So you end up just numbering them. Like, archetype 4, angry man. It's like, oh, the black guy's angry. Oh no, just call it Archetype 4, it'll be fine, or Jeff or something. But if you exaggerate, and I think there was a completely consistent degree of facial exaggeration across all the characters. I genuinely believe that. There were no women, which was, again, an idiocy on our part. That felt like a technical decision, by the way. That felt like, well, oh, hang on, we don't have the budget to make the female characters because we did the male ones first. Obviously, we should have done half and half right from the start. What it felt like was a quality issue. Oh, well, in order to get female characters in, we'd have to make them all less good, and then that feels like, like we shouldn't do that. That was the wrong question we were trying to answer. We just got it wrong. We have not made that game. So, for example, the game we're working on at the moment, absolutely 50-50 male and female characters. Of course, inevitably, all the male ones get released first, so we've got nothing like the balance we want, just for technical reasons, like this model's ready, or that power, or that gameplay ability is overbalanced, we need more time on that. We're down to a quarter or a third female. It doesn't go the way you want it to. Case in point here. So, if you exaggerate Western features, facial features, they just look exaggerated. If you exaggerate Asiatic facial features, there is a stereotype there. There is some horrible baggage. If you exaggerate African American features, that is opening up a bag you did not realize you were opening. Now, I don't think they looked, it's certainly not, it was absolutely the opposite of what I want to do. I didn't want it to be a racist stereotype. We weren't aiming for that. I don't think they were racist stereotypes. But when you're in the VO booth, months before the animation goes in, and you're working with the actor and you want a big, solid, characterful read, you do not know what it's going to look like in-game. You just don't. And it's amazing the extent to which the animation will overwrite whatever else you've done. Do you remember Deus Ex Human Revolution? I said I wouldn't work about other people's games, but talk about this was such a famous point. There was one black African-American character in there, and it was just it was beasted quite properly for just being this really crude stereotype. Go back and look at that clip again, and do a transcription of the script. The lines aren't bad. They're not great. They're all right. The vocal performance isn't terrible. On its own, it's not awful. You add the animation, and it just turns into this weird, oh, I'm just a crazy old black woman. It went weird. I firmly believe that was against the express desires of the writers of that game. They cast an awful lot of actors who'd been in The Wire. You don't do that unless you've got some interest in representing diversity, I think. I don't know for sure, I haven't talked to anyone working on it. I think my suspicion is they tried to do the right thing and it got away from them. I was trying to do the right thing with Brink. I was trying to do the right thing with the casting and the performances. As it happened, the black South African character kind of went all right. His big booming voice, it wasn't too bad. I think I'd be horrified if some people were genuinely offended by that, and they've every right to it. They're not wrong if they're offended by that. They may be wrong about my motivations, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you've caused offence, even for good reasons. Well, the problem was the character of Chen. And he had this big, just the face, it wasn't awful, it just got a bit big. It was only when we got back and put it together, because we don't have video playback. We don't get to go, you know what, that's a bit big, can we just bring it in again? It's like, have we got any takes where it's not quite as, lip-smacking and relishing? And it went together. It wasn't racist in intention. I don't think it was actually racist in implementation, but what does my opinion matter? I just know it wasn't what I wanted. And my fear, and this is kind of the reason I bring this up, is I don't want to be scared as a writer. I don't want to think, you know what, maybe let's not go for a diverse cast because I might get it wrong. What if, maybe we make them kind of more Western. Maybe if we just I just really don't want that bad thing to happen. I voted against there being female characters in Brink, specifically because I did not want male players to teabag them. That is not my choice to make. I was wrong about that. Maybe in a perfect world, it wouldn't have happened. That was actually my distress that I was trying to avoid, not anyone playing the game. So, why do things go weird? Lots of reasons, none of which have got to do with talent. I'm not that good a writer. I wouldn't survive in film or TV. I'm good enough for games. The problem, we haven't even reached the problem of me not being a good enough writer. It's such a low fidelity medium in terms of intention. Short story, brilliant. I write it, you read it, it's in your head. That's all about my ability as a writer. I write it, we concept it, we sketchbook it, we get the characters in, we do some mocap, we do some things, the animations go in, we have to cut that line, the camera goes over there, we have to use that line from that session and that take from that one and stitch them together. Maybe we'll hit my limitations as a writer. That sounds really egotistical. We're more likely to hit the technical limitations and the budget resources before we do that. What's your takeaway from this? Well, hopefully it doesn't matter. Hopefully you'll be working on games you've got much more control over. You'll be able to stylize things. You'll be able to have absolute control over the tone of your content. I'm not asking for any special pleading. I just want to know that when the stuff goes weird, and it will carry on going weird, it's not necessarily through any sort of lack of effort. In fact, the scary thing is, the harder you try and do the right thing, the greater the chance of it getting weird and wrong. Thank you very much.